my column in the Tribune, I again visit the past. But this time I don't visit the past as if it was a past event. I try and visit a past self. All of us, we have different versions of ourselves. There are good versions, there are bad versions, there are indifferent versions. Often enough, there are also versions of what we were at different points in our lives. I am certainly no longer the person I was maybe 10 years ago. Maybe I'm not even the same person that I was 2 weeks ago, or the same person that I was yesterday. Events change us, lives change us, aging changes us, maturity changes us, and so much of what we actually become is shaped by the places where we are. In this column, I revisit an old house and the memory that old house carried for me. Also, in that same piece, in this column, I try and look at myself, at what I must have been when I was a child in that house, and I try to see myself as I am today from the eyes of that child. And there is something which comes there straight away, which comes to mind. I do not think that child would recognize the adult which I am today. It is something that perhaps would be valid for not just for me, but for many of us as we age, as we move to different places, as we go through the course of certain events which finally shape us and change us from on a day-to-day basis. It brings us again to that old saying, change is the only constant. That having been said, visiting the past is something which we Indians specialize in, though we may not have a record in terms of written history. Our oral histories, our oral traditions are extremely strong, and much of what we identify ourselves with or what we seek and draw our identities from comes from oral traditions, many of which go back several centuries. This is another aspect that I take up and have taken up in the past in other columns, again in the Tribune. At the same time, there are small things, small little events which really end up shaping us, small little events that impact us without our really realizing what has happened. A person whom we met, a walk. I am very fond of walking. This is one of the biggest reasons why I spend as much time as possible in the hills of the Western Himalaya. I live most of the year in this part of the world, and I try and walk as much as I can along the old trails that I have known all my life. And many of these trails are the trails which I had known as a child. Those trails, some of them have changed, some of them have altered. There's a lot of construction which has happened. There's a lot of building work which has happened all over in these hills. And many of those places have become unrecognizable. But all this, at times, there are interruptions. But overall, there's almost a seamless flow of going through life or going through that past. And this is something which, if you experience life, so to say, in the slow lane, and the slow lane is not necessarily very slow. The mind can be moving very, very fast, because that mind, when it is supposedly at rest, is actually furious. It is at times when one has been sitting, one has been visiting past places, as I have done in this piece, is that within the course of maybe a few minutes of moving from one room into the next, rooms which one had known so well, paths which has one known so well, events which one was familiar with, places and people that once one was familiar with, revisiting those at different points in different places with different perspectives invariably gives us a fresh insight into ourselves as we are today. I'm not getting into any judgments here, because becoming judgmental is it's not such a great thing to become judgmental about something which one really has no judgment about. There is, if we were to look at not just biological evolution, but if we were to look at our evolution of ourselves, am I a better person than what I was 10 years ago. And what would I call to be a better person? Wealthier, more comfortable. I think one of those important things of being a better person is how much more kindness and compassion have I developed in my life. Unfortunately, I can say it for myself, I do not think I am a very good version of myself. I think I would like to be a better version of myself. These are reflections which come across, and I try to bring across in the multiple pieces that one has written through the course of several years, several months, several weeks. In fact, I think my writing for the Tribune goes back a few decades. Amongst my earliest pieces, which were published maybe 25, 30 years ago, were in this paper. And this is a paper which has had a very strong attachment as far as we are concerned as a family. Because even as a family, when my ancestors were in Lahore, the two papers which I'm told which would come regularly to the house, one was the very anglicized and the very colonial paper, the Civil and Military Gazette, and the second was the Tribune. And the Tribune has continued with its tradition of being regularly dropped on our doorstep every single morning as long as I remember. And placed there are times when I have been asked to carry the print version of the paper to different people in other parts of our country. Coming back to what I was talking about and the writing which one has been doing, so much of this writing comes from a very diverse lot of reading, a very diverse lot of influences, and so many of those influences are actually influences which have emerged with very little information or very little knowledge. For example, where are we going to work? What are the jobs we are going to take? Whom we are going to marry? Which is the city which we are going to live in? We do these things with very, very little information, with very, very little of making conscious choices of moving in specific directions which will take us there, given that we have weighed out all the pros and cons of that particular thing. On the other hand, certain minor things like, say, going to the sabzi mandi and buying vegetables, we will go from one vendor to the next. We will see which one gives us the best vegetables, which one is selling them at a good price. We will weigh all that. Similarly, we will also weigh certain experiences. But those experiences, again, do not necessarily come out of choice. Those experiences, they come by what I sometimes refer to as maybe a slipstream. They come to us in ways that, in the most unexpected ways, call it serendipity, call it chance, call it fluke. Uh, Again, moving back into all this, into this very freewheeling conversation, the way my columns are also, which the Tribune has been kind enough to let me have a free hand, and they're fairly freewheeling. I don't talk about politics. I do not talk about defense. I do not talk about economics, because those are certain things. There are far better people, far better qualified people, and who have far greater knowledge than I have on these aspects. I take is some of the simpler things, the things of everyday living. A day, an event, a person, a book read, because these again are a dimension to our lives which influence us, which shape us, which give us our everyday experiences. I have enjoyed writing for the Tribune. I hope, even if you've not enjoyed reading them, they may have hopefully provoked a thought, may have led to some sort of a thought process. And apart from everything else, I would be very, very happy to hear back from the proverbial gentle readers. Do tell me what you think about these. Do tell me what you feel about these. Do tell me if there's something you think I should write about. And equally importantly, please tell me if there's something you think I should not write about. Thank you.